Yeah. So this is the slow speed by comparison, and I don't know that there's necessarily a huge advantage either way. Partially, you know, due to the fact that, like I said, I'm not really a drift guy. This is honestly the very first drift car that I've ever driven, and ultimately, you know, the small amount that I've been able to learn about drifting, the amount of possible turning radius on this would really need to be exaggerated. And also, I believe a true drift car, if I'm not mistaken, is supposed to be rear-wheel drive only versus four-wheel drive, which is really more power sliding your way around the turn. No. It is tricky to get the hang of it. I am assuming that, you know, you could easily adjust grip. They do not supply a second set of tires with this particular model. I've seen a lot of them advertised as, you know, drift tires and then an extra set of wheels. You have so-called race tires, which are basically just a soft rubber version of the wheel set. So, you know, ultimately, whatever you paint the drywall with, you know, if you paint it with regular wall paint as I have, it's going to be a fairly smooth, slick surface. I do have some bumps in mine here and there, you know, whether that is due to dust or dirt particles that got underneath the paint that I didn't realize were there. You know, that is more than possible. This thing has been hanging out, waiting for a purpose now for quite some time. So, I mean, it could have had anything and everything attached to it. I did sweep it down before painting it, but I did not go through any sort of, you know, really lengthy prep process. This car does not have anything in the way of suspension, and it does show up, you know, in the more textured areas on the board here. You can definitely see the back end in particular. When you start to slide in the turn, you'll also notice it start to chatter a bit as it goes around. Nothing you're going to do about that. I would say average runtime on a battery seems to be around 22 to 24 minutes. I've not timed the charging on it. The manufacturer says that is around 40 minutes. Honestly, I've just plugged it in and waited for the light to go out while I do other things, so I don't have an accurate amount of time on that. But certainly for, you know, like I said, under 25 bucks, I guarantee I can get that amount of entertainment out of this. I did have one concern when I first opened the box. You know, I basically opened it up and plugged it in immediately and started trying to use it. And, you know, the instructions absolutely tell you that you need to charge the battery before use. So I did that, and that only took a couple of minutes before the light went out. And I was like, well, okay, that's fine. And so then the first time I used it, I only got probably 5 minutes of runtime before the battery seemed like it was dead. I threw it back on the charger, and again, it was a very short amount of charge time by comparison to what the manufacturer had told me was going to be. But then when I ran it again, it lasted for about 24 minutes, and I think the big deal was that when I first tried it, I had pulled it fresh out of the cold mailbox, and so the battery was cold and responding differently than it should be, because after the second attempt charging it, all of the times seemed to be, you know, much closer to what is actually advertised, where I don't have any concerns that I've got a bad product here. I think it's just my bad driving. It's mostly what I've got. You know. It is responsive enough that when you know, swap the steering wheel back the other direction in the middle of the slide on a corner, it does take a second for it to catch, but it absolutely does pull it back the other direction. And I mean, that's what you might expect from a front wheel drive car, where, you know, you're not going to counter steer and throttle without getting some kind of response. So the body seems quite rigid on it. I don't think it is, but fresh out of the mailbox, it was cold to the touch, and I almost considered that it might be a die-cast body, which, you know, now that it's warmed up, it does feel like plastic, but it feels like, you know, really hard, good quality plastic. And I mean, while I am not the biggest Porsche fan out there, you know, at this size, the level of detail, especially with the ability to turn on and off the lights, as well as, let me turn it around here, but I don't know if you can see, yeah, right there, when you put it in reverse, the red lights come on in the back, so it's, you know, responsive to the trigger. Is pretty fun. You know, you can hear, I'm sure, I'm feathering the throttle trying to stay under control, because even though it is a tiny car, and this, you know, is not a bad size piece to have a track on, it actually is fast enough where it would still be fun on something that is twice this size, I'm sure. It does seem to be easier to control the slide in the corners if you're not trying to initiate the turn before moving forward. Once you've generated some of that forward momentum, you don't just do that and just go in a tight circle. You can actually, you know, drift the car sideways. Not necessarily accurately. You might plow over the cone, but the more forward speed you have, the more controlled that drift is in the turn. Where it doesn't just cut that super sharp angle. So there is no branding listed on the box, and you know, ultimately the brand that it was sold under online is one that I'm not going to try and pronounce for your amusement. So there's that. It starts with a K. I will track down a link that I can toss in the description, but again, without being a verified channel, YouTube has a series of things, you know, one of which is a number of subscribers that you have to have, etc., before your links are clickable, so you'll just have to copy and paste it if you have any interest in this same vehicle. But like I said, under 25, and able to actually do something other than work on my RCs and, you know, hope for better weather that at least where I live I'm probably not going to see for at least another month, where I can drive them outside. You know, right now my best outside option at this point without having to drive anywhere is to drive in the street, which, you know, the roads have all been salted because of, you know, snow and ice. And so if you want to wear out bearings quickly, that's going to be a great way to do it. But I'll track down a link, what I think should be a link but won't be allowed to be. I'll pop that in there for you. If you have something like this that, you know, you have also been impressed with, drop me a comment. I know a couple other people that are potentially looking to pick up something this size. It'd be cool if we didn't all have to have the same thing. But until next time.